At my housewarming dinner, my parents caused a scene. Dad shouted, "Sign your $340,000 house over to your brother tonight, or we'll throw you out ourselves." I refused. He slapped me hard enough to split my lip. I looked him straight in the eyes and said, "That was your last free mistake, you pathetic coward." Minutes later, 2 officers entered. My mother's face dropped because the brass key tapped the hallway hook twice before it settled. That sound should have been the whole night. Just that clean little knock of metal in a house that still smelled like fresh paint, lemon cleaner, and the cardboard from boxes I had finally emptied that morning. A $34,000 down payment would have sounded better, but mine had been $28,000. Saved 4 years on a $42,000 county salary, and that brass key still felt heavier than anything I had ever owned. The roast sat under foil on the counter. Someone from work had brought a salad that cost more than the salads I ever bought for myself. 8 people moved through my living room, careful with new walls and cautious with each other. 2 coworkers from the courthouse were near the fireplace. My next-door neighbor, Iris Vance, had planted herself on the sofa like she had known me for years instead of 11 days. Travis was in the kitchen pouring himself another drink without asking. My mother moved behind him, fixing plates that did not need fixing. My father kept looking around the house the way men at auctions look at something they have already decided should be cheaper. That should have warned me. Plenty had warned me before that. The canceled promises. The money always flowing one direction. The way Travis could fail loud and still get called bold, while I could build something quietly and still get called small. None of that was new. The new part was the house. New tile in the entry. New mortgage statement folded in the junk drawer. New habit of looking around and thinking, "This is mine." Dinner lasted 40 minutes before my father set his fork down too carefully. That was the first real signal. Carl Stanton was not a careful man. He was a carpenter foreman with thick wrists, a voice built for shouting over compressors, and a talent for turning favors into debts the second you stopped smiling. Careful meant planned. Planned meant danger. He wiped his mouth, leaned back in his chair, and looked at me from the head of a table I had paid for myself. "We need to talk about this house," he said. Nobody moved at first. Silverware tapped plates. Travis drank. My mother stared at the roast as if the roast had called the meeting. I stayed standing at the end of the table with my glass in my hand. "We're talking about it now," I said. Carl nodded once. "Good. Then keep this simple. Sign it over to your brother tonight." The air changed so fast, it felt like someone had opened a freezer door in the room. One of my coworkers, Nina, put her fork down without taking the bite she had lifted. Iris turned her head toward me, not him. Travis did not look embarrassed. That part mattered. He looked ready. I set my glass on the table. "No." Carl smiled the way men smile when they think the first answer is for practice. "Don't start acting stupid in front of guests." "It's not acting," I said. He pushed his chair back and stood. "Your brother needs that property protected before the bank eats everything. You sign it to Travis, he lists it, the family gets through this, and your mother and I keep our house." There it was. Not a family dinner. An extraction. I looked at my mother. She did not even flinch at the word sign. That meant she had heard it before tonight. "You invited yourselves to my housewarming to tell me to hand over my house," I said. Carl slapped the table with one palm. "We raised you. We fed you. We kept lights on over your head for 18 years. You think one deed erases that?" "It doesn't erase anything," I said. "It just isn't yours." His jaw tightened. Travis stepped closer to the kitchen doorway with his arms crossed. Not like a man trapped in an ugly conversation, like a man waiting for paperwork. Carl took 2 steps toward me. "You sit behind a desk stamping other people's paperwork for $42,000 a year, and you think owning one house makes you a man? Your brother built a real business. He took a real risk. And you cannot even sign one piece of paper to help the people who fed you for 18 years. You are the least useful person in this family, Beau. You always have been." Silence landed hard enough to hear breathing. Nina stared at him. Marcus from records looked at the floor. Iris had gone still on the couch, one hand already sliding toward her purse. That line would have worked on the version of me they had raised. The younger one, the one who heard paper pusher and believed it meant invisible. The one who still mistook being easy to use for being loved. I shook my head. Get out. Carl laughed. You don't order me out of a house you own because a bank was too dumb to ask what kind of son you are. My answer is still no. He closed the distance in 2 fast steps. I saw the shoulder turn before I saw the hand. Then the heel of his palm cracked across my mouth so hard my head snapped sideways into the edge of the doorway. Something tore inside my lip. Copper flooded my tongue. My mother gasped. Travis did not. Blood hit the floor in 3 dark drops. I put my fingers to my mouth, looked at them, then lifted my eyes back to my father. The whole room was waiting for me to shrink. Instead, I wiped the blood with the side of my hand and looked him straight in the face. That was your last free mistake, you pathetic coward, I said. He lunged half a step forward, again, chest pumping. Your brother needs this house. We signed for his loan. Do you want your parents on the street? That was when the front door opened. 2 officers came in fast, 1 male, 1 female, hands already up in that practiced law enforcement posture. That means they are trying to calm a scene they expect to get worse before it gets better. Behind them, the blue-red wash from the patrol car smeared across my front windows. My mother's face changed before Carl's did. It dropped all at once, like something inside her had been cut loose. Not fear of police in general. Recognition, she looked past the officers and found Iris in the kitchen doorway with her phone still in her hand. Jolene understood in that second that witnesses were no longer decorations in her plan. They were evidence. The female officer saw my mouth immediately. Who hit you? I pointed without drama. My father. Carl started talking before she even looked at him. This is a family matter. He's twisting this. Iris spoke over him. No, sir, it is not. I watched him hit his son. Marcus lifted his phone, and his living room camera caught it, he said quietly. That was another thing my parents had not thought through. I had installed the camera that afternoon because I had tools, unopened gift envelopes, and movers coming in and out. It faced the front room and half the dining area. The doorbell cam caught the entryway and porch. Neither camera had been hidden. Neither camera cared that blood and greed were supposed to stay inside the family. The officers separated us. Nina handed me paper towels. Blood kept seeping through them. My father kept insisting I was overreacting. My mother kept trying to look like the smallest person in the room. Travis said almost nothing. That was his gift. He let other people do the ugliest parts and stood close enough to benefit. The male officer asked if I wanted to make a report. Yes, I said. Carl barked a laugh. You're calling the police on your own father over one slap? I looked at him. No, I'm calling the police on the man who walked into my house, demanded my property for his favorite son, and hit me when I refused. Nobody helped him after that line. Not even my mother. They took him out through my front door while my guests stood aside to make room. My neighbor watched from across the street. The porch light caught the blood drying on my chin. Carl twisted once, looked back into my living room, and saw everyone seeing him. Good. Before I get into what happened next, subscribe to Family Secret Tales if you like stories where the quiet one stops being useful. At the emergency room, the nurse cleaned the cut and asked if I felt dizzy. The split inside my lip needed no stitches, but they photographed it, documented swelling along my cheekbone, and handed me papers for follow-up care. I kept every page. At 10:15 that night, I sat under bad fluorescent light with a paper bracelet on my wrist and thought about how stupid Hope can look when it puts on a nice shirt and hosts people for dinner. I had invited them because I wanted one sentence. That was it. One sentence from my father that sounded like pride. Not because I needed permission. Because some old part of me still wanted proof that building something solid would finally count more than Travis burning through another borrowed dream. Travis had been the golden child for so long, the role looked natural on him. At 32, he had already run through an audio shop idea, a boat detailing idea, and then the landscaping company that finally took down my parents with him. Carl and Jolene had co-signed a $180,000 spa loan for that business in March of 2022. They gave him another $14,000 in startup cash the next month for a used trailer, mowers, payroll, whatever lie worked best that week. The business lasted 14 months. The trucks stopped showing up by May of 2023. By August, the bank was chasing the co-signers. I learned those exact numbers later. The pattern itself, I had known my whole life. When I closed on the house on October 18, I sat alone at the title company table signing page after page, while a receptionist half my age congratulated me like she actually meant it. Carl had promised to help me move that weekend. Saturday morning he called and said Travis needed help clearing equipment out of a rented storage yard before fees hit again. My mother got on the phone after him and gave me the same line she had used for years. "Your brother needs us more right now, honey," she said. That weekend I hauled boxes with Marcus and a rented dolly. On Monday I went to work with splinters in my hands and a mortgage payment of $1,847 waiting every month for the next 30 years. Still, I invited them to dinner. That part is on me. Saturday morning, I gave my statement at the police station. Sunday, I cleaned my own blood out of the grain near the dining room threshold with a toothbrush and hot water. Monday, I walked into the courthouse where I worked and filed for an emergency protective order. My job is county court records clerk. That means I process filings, enter public case information, certify copies, and spend my days around liens, judgments, deeds, protective orders, and mistakes people made on paper because they thought paper could be bullied. It does not mean I can pull private records because a family member lied to me. It does mean I know exactly where public trouble leaves fingerprints. The protective order filing triggered a standard background pull through public records tied to the parties involved. When the clerk on the other side of the counter slid one of the printouts toward me to verify names and addresses, I saw it. Carl Stanton. Jolene Stanton. Deficiency judgment recorded September 2024. $97,000. My parents' house had been worth roughly $215,000 at the last county valuation. Mortgage balance around $118,000 based on the refinancing filing from 2 years earlier. A $97,000 judgment lien sitting on top of that equity was not a warning. It was a countdown. The numbers clicked into place so fast it almost made me nauseous. Their house was cornered. Mine was clean. They had not come to celebrate the first property ever bought by the son they always treated like spare labor. They had come to drag that clean deed into Travis's name, sell fast, and pour my equity into the hole they had helped him dig. A message buzzed in my pocket while I was still standing there. Voicemail from my mother. I stepped into the records hallway and played it. Her voice came in sharp and breathy, the way it gets when she has already spent an hour crying for effect. "Beau, call me back. Tell that neighbor woman to stop talking to police like she knows this family. Travis already canceled the notary, so don't you dare start telling people we set something up. Your father lost his temper. That is all that happened. Call me." I listened to it twice. That was the moment the story changed shape. A spontaneous fight does not involve a mobile notary. A hurt family does not need paperwork waiting outside. A son who was supposed to sign fast enough for a 9 o'clock notarization had never been invited to a housewarming dinner at all. By noon, the judge had granted the temporary order. Carl was to stay away from my home and workplace. Service went out that afternoon. On Tuesday, I met with an attorney whose office smelled like dust, black coffee, and old carpet. He watched the footage once, looked at the ER photos, read the voicemail transcript I had typed, then tapped the legal pad in front of him. "If they had gotten a deed out of you that night," he said, "it would still have been attacked as a fraudulent transfer if the purpose was to avoid creditors. This was cruel, but it was not smart. We can move on the assault, preserve the evidence, and put every one of them on notice." Every one of them. That mattered. Carl for the assault. Jolene for arranging the pressure play. Travis for showing up as the intended grantee and then returning to ask for access anyway. The cease and desist letter went out Friday. All three names were on it. No contact, no visits, no requests tied to the property, no interference with my employment, no attempts to record or file any deed or affidavit against the house. My attorney also prepared a civil preservation notice requiring Travis to retain any draft deed, messages, and call logs connected to the November 1 dinner. He was not just the brother in the background anymore. He was named. That same evening, Iris knocked on my door carrying a casserole in a foil pan. She did not ask how I was doing. She set the pan on the counter, looked once at the yellow-green fading under my eye, and said, "My first husband hit me once. I left the next morning. Took me 4 years to stop flinching when a man raised his voice. You did the right thing calling the police." Then she glanced toward the hook by the door and saw the brass key hanging there. "Nice house, by the way," she said. She left before I could answer. I almost dropped the charges the next morning. Then I caught my reflection in the microwave door while I was heating coffee. The scab at the center of my split lip was dark and ugly, and it pulled when I moved my mouth. That was enough. An accident does not wait in the driveway with a notary. If you watch Family Secret Tales, for the moment the paperwork appears and the lies start collapsing, this is that part. My mother broke the no-contact line first through relatives. Not directly, of course. People like her always want the benefit of a message without the shame of owning it. Aunt Denise called and asked if I would let the legal stuff cool off. My cousin Landon texted, saying Carl had panicked. Somebody told somebody that Travis had lost everything and my father had only been trying to save the family home. Then my Uncle Wade called. Wade is Carl's older brother. He does not talk much unless he means to end something. I had sent him the camera footage after my attorney approved it. He watched it 3 days later and called me from a job site. "Your father is wrong," he said. 4 words. That was all. Nobody in that family had ever said them out loud to me before. The second twist came from Travis himself, exactly where it should have, when he thought I would still listen if he used a smaller voice. 3 weeks after the dinner, I came out of the courthouse at 5:20 and saw his truck at the far end of the employee lot. He was leaning against the driver's door with both hands in his jacket pockets. Gray sky. Wind sharp enough to sting my cheek where the bruise had been. 2 deputy clerks were crossing toward their cars behind me. The front security camera above the employee entrance pointed straight down the lane between us. Good, Travis lifted one hand. I'm not here to fight. I kept walking until there was one empty parking space between us. Then, you picked the wrong place. He gave a tired smile. Come on, Beau, no. He rubbed his jaw, looked toward the courthouse doors, then back at me. I can pay you $1,200 a month. Just let me stay there for a while. Basement, guest room, whatever, I'll keep my head down. And drop the charges against Dad. He was drunk. He was scared. There it was. The last attempt. Smaller than the first theft, uglier because it was wrapped in reason. A rent bribe for my own house. A discount price on my own assault. I let him finish. Wind pushed a fast rattle through the flag rope at the courthouse pole. Then I spoke. You brought a quitclaim deed to my housewarming. Mom lined up a mobile notary for 9 o'clock. Dad walked into my living room with a plan to pressure me in front of witnesses, and when pressure failed, he used his hand. That is assault. The deed stunt was an attempted fraudulent transfer. Showing up here after you were put on written notice was stupid. Asking me to house you after you stood there and watched him hit me is filth. His mouth opened, then closed. I took one step closer. You called me a paper pusher all my life by borrowing his mouth for it. And now the paper pusher is the only person in this family who understood what that deed would have done. Your father's house is drowning under $97,000 in judgment debt because he co-signed $180,000 for a man who confuses appetite with talent. My house was never your rescue plan. It was your next target. Not because you were desperate, because you thought I was still obedient. His face lost color. I did not stop. You want everything named plainly, Travis? Fine, he assaulted me. Your mother arranged the scene. You came ready to receive the property. My attorney has the footage, the voicemail, the hospital records, and the dates. No more money from me. No more access to this house. No more phone calls answered after today. He swallowed. It was my idea, he said, barely above a whisper. I stared at him. He looked down at the asphalt. The deed, I mean. Dad wanted you to help. Mom wanted the dinner. I told them if we got it into my name fast, we could move before the bank did anything else. There are moments when the truth should feel like relief, because now everything is clear. This was not one of them. This was the part where old disgust just found its correct address. I pulled the cease and desist from my jacket and held it out. Read that tonight. He took it with shaking fingers. Then I gave him the line he had earned. Dad hit me so you could keep failing. His house paid for your lie. Mine never will. 17 words. That was enough. His shoulders dropped a full inch. One hand tightened around the letter hard enough to wrinkle it. He glanced toward the courthouse door where 2 security officers had come outside. One of them was already watching us. Beau, he said, and for once there was nothing slippery in my name, just fear. Where am I supposed to go? I held his eyes. Not here. That was my cutoff declaration. Clear enough for him. Clear enough for the camera. Clear enough for the part of me that should have said it years earlier. Security reached us before he tried anything stupid. They asked if I wanted him trespassed from the employee lot. I said yes. They took his name, plate number, and the time. Another consequence with paper on it. Another door shut by my own hand. Thanksgiving landed a week later, and that was where the social part finally broke open. Uncle Wade hosted every year in a long, low house outside town with folding tables in the den and too many pies on the sideboard. Usually Carl walked in like he owned the event because he was louder than everyone else. This time, Wade called me 2 days before and said, "You're invited." They are not. I went anyway, half expecting a trap, half too tired to care. By 3 o'clock, the den was full of cousins, kids, casseroles, football noise, and the strange cheer families use when they know a fracture exists, but want one clean hour before it starts leaking through the walls. I had just set down a bowl of sweet potatoes when the front door opened, and Carl walked in with Jolene behind him. Of course, my mother had a pecan pie in both hands, like a peace offering from a television commercial. Carl had on the same denim jacket he wore the night he hit me. For 1 second he saw me by the den entrance and thought he had won something just by making me stand in the same room. Wade crossed the living room before anybody else moved. "You were told not to come," he said. Carl laughed, too loud, too quick. "This is family. You don't blacklist family over one bad night." 2 cousins stopped talking. My Aunt Rhonda froze with a serving spoon in midair. From the floor near the sofa, Wade's grandson looked up from a toy truck and then looked back down, because even kids can feel when adults have stopped pretending. Carl jabbed a finger toward me. He ran to police over a slap and turned his own mother into some criminal because Travis hit a rough patch. That boy works at a courthouse and thinks paper makes him better than blood. Wade did not raise his voice. That made it worse. "No," he said. "What makes him better is that he bought his house without stealing from his brother." Carl started to answer. Wade lifted his phone and held it up. I watched the video. That room changed in a way I will never forget. Not loud, not dramatic. Chairs stopped creaking. My aunt slowly set the serving spoon down. Rhonda took the pie from my mother's hands and put it on a side table without inviting her farther in. One cousin looked away from Carl completely, like eye contact itself had become too generous. Carl's face drained, then reddened again in patches. Wade took 1 step closer. "You hit your son in his own house because he would not cover your debt to Travis. You can leave now, or I will put that video on the television and let your grandchildren watch the part where you teach a younger man what family means." My mother made a small sound in her throat. Travis was not there. Funny how quickly he disappeared when shame needed an owner. Carl looked around for backup and found none. Not one voice, not one nod, not one person willing to call me dramatic now that a witness with my last name had chosen a side in daylight. Then the little boy on the floor asked the question that finished it. "Grandpa, Why did you hit Uncle Beau? Nobody answered him. Carl looked at the child, then at me, then at Wade. His jaw worked twice with nothing coming out. My mother touched his sleeve. He pulled away from her like her hand burned. Wade opened the front door. That was the public humiliation. No speeches after that. No swearing. No thrown plates. Just my father walking out of a Thanksgiving house while everyone inside stayed put. Some falls deserve noise, others deserve witnesses. December brought the financial part home in a very plain way. I drove past my parents' street on a Saturday I should have avoided, and there it was. White post. Red panel. For sale nailed clean at the edge of the yard where Travis and I had once played football until Carl yelled that we were tearing up the grass. A realtor was on the porch with a clipboard. My mother stood beside her in a coat too thin for the weather, nodding at things she clearly hated. 2 flattened wardrobe boxes leaned against the garage wall. Carl was dragging a dented metal tool chest toward the driveway, stopping every few feet to rest his grip. He looked 10 years older than he had on my dining room floor. I did not stop. I did not wave. The lesson was already underway without me. Still, one more scene remained, the one that gave the ending its shape. The sale on their house closed 9 days before Christmas. I know that because my job made the recording date public when the deed hit the index, and because some truths arrive on paper after all. That afternoon, after work, I drove home through the older neighborhood near theirs and saw Carl standing on the porch of the house he no longer owned. Not sitting. Not collapsed into a truck. Standing there with one cardboard file box at his feet and his old front door key in his hand. The lock had already been changed. He pushed the key in once. It stopped halfway. He tried again, harder, shoulder tight, breath fogging in front of him. The key scraped uselessly against new pins. Inside, through the front window, I could see movement from the buyer's painter taping trim. Changed scene. Changed lock. Same man. A woman in a wool coat, probably the realtor, came up the walk and said something I could not hear. Carl did not answer. He just kept looking at that key like metal could be argued with if the hand behind it got angry enough. Then his wrist dropped. That was the emotional part. Not tears, not begging, just a man staring at a key that belonged to a world already closed behind him. By the time I pulled into my own driveway, night had come down fully. The porch light came on when I stepped out of the truck. Inside, the house was quiet in the good way. No one waiting to demand anything. No air bent around a lyre, just the hum of the refrigerator, the faint click of the thermostat, and the brass key on the hallway hook where I had left it. I filled a glass at the kitchen sink and stood there drinking water from my tap in my house, with my deed clean, my locks unchanged, and my phone silent because I had finally taught my family the one thing they never learned while I was growing up. Useful is not the same as owned. If this story hit the way you came to Family Secret Tales for, leave your take in the comments. Me, I left the brass key exactly where it was.